variation, that is the first blank. So what are they? Measures of variation. So they are used to describe the spread of the values in a set of data. So we've been dealing with one already. We've been dealing with the median. Median is technically a measure of variation. And so we're going to talk about what are the two other measures of variations. We also want to make sure we can understand some terminology to describe the lowest and the highest number. Like, I know I can give you a list of numbers and you can tell me what's the lowest, what's the highest. But we also have a more advanced way to say that. So to talk about the lowest number in a list, you may see the word lower extreme, or you may see the word minimum. So both of those words mean, you want to say, well, what is the smallest number in the list? So if I say, what's the lower extreme? You look at your list and you say, well, 10 is the smallest, so it's 10. Or what's the minimum? So tell me what's the smallest number. So the highest number in a data set could also be called the upper extreme or the maximum, okay? So it just depends on the terminology that we're given, but in higher level math, right, we're in high school now, we're expected to know those fancier words to describe the lowest number and the highest number. So what we can do with our numbers is we can find the range, okay, range of data. This is the difference between the greatest and the least, or the difference between your max and your min, greatest between your lower and upper extreme. And so what we're doing is we're going to take the larger value in my list minus the smallest value in my list, or take that maximum minus the minimum, okay? So for number one here, I wanted to find the range of the data. Range is saying I'm going to take the highest number minus the smallest number. So 40 is the largest number in my list, and 23 is the smallest number in my list, because these are already put in order for me. I didn't really have to scan too hard. I can see 23 is smallest, 40 is largest, and then I subtract those two and I get 17. So that's it. So range is so easy. You're taking your smallest and you're subtracting that from your largest number, okay? So we don't want to forget about range. That's the four things that usually you heard about in junior high, right? Mean, median, mode, and range was the fourth thing that you also talked about. Okay, now something that may be newer is quartiles. Quartiles, they are divided into quarters. So how many sections would I have if I'm dividing something into quarters? 4, right? So there's 4 quarters to make up $1. That's why we call them quarters. So I already know how to split my data in half, right? That's the median. And the best analogy for this is, if I'm trying to split my data into 4 equal pieces, right? I'm trying to break those numbers into 4 equal groups. You want to think about it like a pizza. If this is my pizza right here, do you cut a pizza from the middle out like this and just start randomly slicing like that? Is that how you cut your pizza? Do you start in the middle and just make random cuts? If you do, that's a little terrifying, right? So you don't do that. How do you cut a pizza? What is the first cut that you make in a pizza? Yeah, straight. You cut it in half, right? So that's exactly what we're doing here. If I want to cut something into quarters or eventually eighths like a pizza, I cut that pizza in half, right? So we start with the same idea for my data. I want to cut this data in half. So let's go ahead and do that. We want to find the median, right? That's finding halfway through. That's the middle. So I can cross off 1 and 21. I can cross off 4 and 16, 5 and 14, 6 and 11, until I have 2 numbers in the middle here. And then I can say, well, what's the middle of the middle? Yes. 7.5. Good. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. All right, so yeah, 7.5 is directly in between 7 and 8. That one's a little bit easier to see, right? If I have 2 numbers right next to each other, it's clear to see that the middle is 7.5. So that's step 1, right? That'd be like me cutting my pizza in half. But I need to keep going. I got to cut into quarters now. So now I make another cut. I cut each half into halves again. And that's exactly what I want to do here. If I'm trying to find my lower quartile, okay, that's the first thing. My lower quartile, that's saying I want to cut the first half in half again, okay? So if this is my first half of the data, the lower half, right, those numbers are smaller, I want to do that process one more time. I'm going to cross off 1 and 7. I'm going to cross off 4 and 6 until what number is left in the middle here? What do I have? 5, right? This would be considered my lower quartile, or we often abbreviate that as Q1, okay? Lower quartile is Q1. So it's the same thing. We know how to cut data in half. We know how to find the median. Now we're taking it one step further. We're cutting the first half in half, right? That's 1/4 of the way through. Then we'll cut the second half in half. That's 75% of the way through. So we can fill out a couple things about my lower quartile. We can say that the lower quartile is the median. Remember, median just means middle. So it's the median of the lower half, okay? So once I cut everything in half, now I've cut it in half again, okay? Then that's also talked about as 25% through. You may hear me say, what's 25% of the way through this list? 5. That's 25% of the way through. Halfway through, 7.5. Now we go again. To find the upper quartile, or my Q3, I do the same thing. Now I look at my upper half here, which is all these numbers, 8 through 21, and I start crossing off side to side until I get one number in the middle. So we'll cross off 8, we'll cross off 21, 11, 16, until 14 is in the middle. And so that would be my Q3, okay? So quartile 1 is the first quartile, first number that we see that's important. Quartile 2 is actually considered your median. We only ever call it the median, but it's technically my quartile 2. And then quartile 3 is 75% of the way through. So we can say that the upper quartile is the median or the middle of the upper half, okay? And so that's really it. We know how to do the median. We know this process. It's now just doing that again. Just keep cutting my data into parts. So again, the median of my upper half is the upper quartile, or 75% of the way through. Think of it as quarters. 25, 50, 75 cents. Yeah. Up here, yes. All right, so that's about it for the quartiles. The last thing on that list is interquartile range. Interquartile range. So we already talked about range was. Range right here says take the greatest minus the least. This is the same idea, but for interquartile range, I'm only going to subtract the quartiles. I take my upper quartile, my Q3, minus the lower quartile. I'm not going to take 21 minus 1. I'm taking quartile minus quartile, largest minus smallest. So we can say that interquartile range is going to be Q3 minus Q1. Okay, same idea. Larger quartile minus smaller quartile. Still subtracting for the range. So we'll say that that is going to be 14 minus 5, which is 9. That would be my interquartile range. Okay, bigger quartile minus smaller quartile. That's it. That's all we're really talking about today. So let's do that a couple more times to make sure we get the hang of it, and then you guys will have lots of time to do your homework. Okay, so on to the next page here, example 2. We want to find the following things: quartiles, interquartile range, regular range, and then my extremes. So first things first, we have to number my, put them in order, right? Have to put my numbers in order. I saw people all day today just start crossing things off. That does not help us at all if it's not in order. So we want to start with 61 being the lowest number, and then we can cross that off. Then 79, then 82, then 88, 95, and 100. So that would be the correct order. Now I can start crossing things off. But we can also answer some of the easier questions. Let's answer what my upper and lower extreme is, right? Those are just the easy ones where I look. The largest number of this list is 100. The lowest number of this list is 61. There's 2 answers already done. So we can say upper extreme, 100. Lower extreme, 61. That's it. That also helps me find the regular range. The range is just largest number minus smallest number. So we can take 100 minus 61. So 100 minus 61, typing that in, gives me 39. So you can find 3 things without having to do any work, just by looking at your problem. Okay, now we want to start crossing off. So let's go and look at the median first, right? We always cut in half, and then I can work on the quartiles. So half first, then your quarters. So 61, 100, 79, 95. We run into an issue. If I cross off 82, I'd also have to cross off 88. That's not good. So this is in between. I want to figure out what's exactly in between 82 and 88. Now this one may be harder to see, right? You're like, I don't know what's directly between 82 and 88. So the trick is we add up the 2 numbers that we're trying to find the middle between, and we divide them by 2. And that's it, okay? So if you're unsure what's directly in between 82 and 88, add the numbers up, divide by 2. You can use your calculator for this. So when we type that in, we should get 85. So that means that 85 is the median, okay? That's the number that's directly in between 82 and 88. Some of you can do that in your head. That's totally fine. But for those of you that cannot, you want to use the little formula. So that means that's halfway through. So now, to find my lower quartile, I look at the first half of my data, which is why it's super important to draw a bar here to show, hey, here's halfway. I'm ignoring everything else over here. I'm only going to find the middle of what I have underlined in green. So we would cross off 61 and 82. I'm left with 79 in the middle, right? If this is the first half of my data, 61, 82, one number in the middle, 79 is the lower quartile. Okay, I do that again. Now we're looking at the upper half of data, so I can cover all this up. I don't need that. I'm saying between 88 and 100 here, I'm going to cross off till I have 1 in the middle. So I cross off 88, I cross off 100, I have 95 in the middle as my upper quartile. And that's about it, all right? So find the middle, find the first half, find the second half, and that's it. Now I can find my interquartile range. Interquartile range is where I subtract my quartiles instead of my extremes, okay? So interquartile range, you want to subtract your quartiles. So we'll take 95 minus 79, bigger one minus smaller one. So that gives me 16 as my interquartile range. And that's it. That's exactly what your homework's going to look like today. Finding all of those pieces of information. So you're gonna do number 3 on your own. I'm going to do the practice with you because I found that one was actually a little bit more challenging. So we'll do this one together, and then you guys can work on number 3. Then once you get that one right, I'll give you the homework, and that's it for today. Okay, so practice. So we have movie tickets. So we can still do this even though I have decimals, and even though I'm talking about money instead of just regular numbers. That's fine. We still need to order our money, though. We want to say smallest cost versus highest cost of movie tickets. So 5 is the smallest. You also don't need to write 0.00. Save yourself some time. You don't need to write those invisible zeros. So we have 5, then 7.5, then 8.75 would be the next price, then 9.5, then 12, 15, there's another 15, an 18, and a 20. So those are all my numbers, all my dollar signs now in the right order, okay? So that's step 1. Now that I have everything in the right order, I can easily see what my lowest and my highest is. I can find the range, and then I can start crossing off. So the lower extreme, remember, lower extreme is just saying, what's the minimum number here? What's the smallest number that we see? 5 would be the smallest. Just make sure here we do want to answer in dollars, right? $5 would be the lowest price that I see. 20 would be the highest price that I see. So that would be my upper extreme, $20. And then to find the range between that, I take the largest number minus smallest number. So 20 minus 5 gives me $15. So that's the range of my movie prices. Makes sense, right? That's $15 difference between the largest and the smallest ticket. Okay, now we can find the median. So this is where I cut my data in half. I say, all right, I'll cross off 5 and 20, 7.5 and 18, 8.75 and 15, 9.5 and 15. I'm left with one number in the middle, which is 12. So if you notice, this is kind of different than the past couple examples. This time, I do have an exact number in the middle, right? Whereas before, on the previous page here, I didn't. I had nothing in the middle. I had to find the middle of the middle. Remember, that depends on how many numbers you have in your list. So we have 12 directly in the middle. So $12 would be my median. And so now this is really important. When I look at the first half of my data, I do not include 12. 12 is the middle. That's kind of the barrier. That's the bar. So I'm only going to cross off numbers from 5 to 9.5. That's the first half there. 12 is the middle. So that's not part of anything, right? That's not on a side. It's in the middle. So I use 5 to 9.5. So I can cross off 5 and 9.5. But then I'm stuck. If I cross off 7.5, I have to cross off 8.75, and that's not good. So this time, I need to find the middle of those two numbers. What's in between 7.5 and 8.75? This one's tough. So this one you definitely need to type into your calculator. I don't expect anyone to know what number is directly in between or is in the middle of 7.5 and 8.75. So we can add those two numbers together and divide by 2. So when I do that, we get $8.13 after some rounding. Okay, so again, I like this one because it shows we can have weird decimals. That is totally allowed for my answers. We may not always have nice whole numbers. So there's my lower quartile. My upper quartile is looking at this upper half of the data. So what I have underlined in green up here on the TV. 15 through 20. Again, 12 is not included. That was my median. So I want to cross off 15 and 20. I have to look in between 15 and 18 now. That's the middle. So you may not know that. That's okay. So 15 plus 18, we can add those two together, divide by 2. That gives me 16.5 as my middle. Directly in between 15 and 18 is 16.5. Okay, now the final thing is that interquartile range. So that's where I take my upper quartile minus the lower quartile. So 16.5 minus 8.13, which gives me $8.37 when I type that in. So you may want a calculator today for your homework because some of them you may get some decimals like this. But that's about it. Pretty easy. Just working on organizing my data, finding the locations of your 25%, 50%, and 75%, because that's going to come in handy for the next lesson.